The Fujifilm X100VI or X100VI, depending on how you want to call it, is a camera that comes after the biggest exploit, the biggest splash that Fujifilm did in the digital era with the camera. And if you haven't lived under a rock for the last 2 years or so, you know what I'm talking about. Basically, you know that the predecessor, the X100V, was a camera that was impossible to find. It had one of the most incredible success in the photographic history. And to the point where you basically couldn't purchase one, either used or new, for a decent price. I'm not saying cheap, I'm not saying discounted, I'm saying decent. We got to the point where a used one would be sold for almost double the price of the new one when the camera was released. And again, if you haven't lived under a rock for the last 2 years, you know that this was a combination of factors, being TikTokers making it become viral to the point where everyone wanted this camera, and at the same time, Fujifilm not being able to produce enough of these cameras to satisfy the demand for this camera during this hotness period that this camera had. This means that basically lately you haven't been able to purchase an X100V basically anywhere in the world. The X100VI is here to try to fix that. Now, of course, the success of the X100V came because of the factors that I told you before, but also that success also means that the camera was really, really, really good. And the camera really was super good. And the X100VI is, the X100V or 5 is arguably the most iconic camera in the Fujifilm digital era. And you can argue that the entire X100 series is the most true to itself kind of camera range in the photographic market. You can argue the Leica M is kind of that, but I believe the X100V is more true to itself than other cameras in the market. And this is because Fuji has basically kept the same idea that began 12, 13 years ago, and I was one of the first adopters of this camera when it was launched, when it was still called FinePix X100, not X System X whatever. It was the FinePix. And I got one when it was launched and I loved it to death. So they kept that design, and basically in version after version, improvement after improvement, they perfected this camera to the point where the X100V, the camera that was the predecessor to the X100VI, was almost perfect. For the time, it was very close to perfection. The X100VI is here to improve what is improvable on the X100V without changing anything that made this camera great. If it ain't broken, why fix it? This is basically the concept that Fuji went for when designing this camera, because basically the design was almost perfect. The X100V brought in the new screen that is articulated, brought in a lot of other improvements like the new lens, which is sharper, much more defined. So there wasn't much to improve. And Fujifilm basically perfected the design of that camera. The majority of the camera design is the same. There's few changes here and there, buttons here, buttons there. Some things have been moved here and there. The camera is thicker, 2mm thicker, and a little bit heavier, but there's a good reason for that. They finally added the missing piece to the X100 series, which is the IBIS, the in-body stabilizer. That makes this camera basically perfect, not almost, basically perfect, because it's got everything you may ever want from a camera like this. The IBIS makes the difference for those who like to shoot motion but don't want to use a tripod. Let's just say you're shooting someone running. You want the background to be perfectly still, but the person running in front of you blurred. Or the opposite, the person waiting for a train in the substate in the underground. You want the person to be very defined and the train to be blurred in front of the person. Well, that without a tripod is much more complicated, because if you don't have a stabilizer, you need to be very steady with your hands. Well, this camera helps you with that, allowing you more creativity, allowing you more freedom to create what it is that you really like. And that's something that cannot be overlooked. This camera is basically giving you everything you may ever want in a small, pocketable package. Now, yes, I told you it's a little bit it's a little bit thicker, 2 millimeters, but I'll take the 2 millimeters over the lack of IBIS every day of my life, and the weight is a little bit more. Now, the weight, I haven't tried the camera, so I don't know how it feels in the ends. The weight may be a difference that some may feel, because they were used to a weight that wasn't that that wasn't changed for the vast majority of the time, and so if it's a bit more, it may change the balance of the camera, but that must be seen. And I'll do my best to get my hands on one of these, because I'm super curious to try this camera out. That being said, the rest of the camera is pretty much the same. The screen is the same, the hybrid viewfinder is the same. And speaking of the hybrid viewfinder, if you haven't watched my video about the X Pro 4 and what I want from the X Pro 4, I want the hybrid viewfinder to be gone. But in the X100, the hybrid viewfinder has to be there. It's the hallmark of this camera. It's what this camera is, and it makes a lot more sense, because being a fixed focal length camera, that hybrid viewfinder is really good, and it's optimized for what that camera does. So don't call me hypocrite. I don't know, how do you say that? Don't call me that, because it's two different cameras for two different purposes. This camera has to stay with the hybrid viewfinder. It's iconic because of that as well. Now, there are a couple of things that could have been improved, and Fuji decided not to improve them. One of them is the battery. The battery that is being used is the same old NP126S. I think I said it correctly. And that is the small, rectangular one. If you think about it in a vacuum, you may be disappointed, because there's new batteries around, they're bigger, there's more performance with it and all of that. But Fujifilm had to keep the size and weight of this camera within a reasonable difference from the predecessors. They couldn't and didn't want to change the design layout of this camera. What this means is that the decision to go with the older battery makes sense. Also because the demographic that this camera is targeting is basically not going to shoot this camera thousands of shots in an hour, like a wedding, the main camera for weddings, or sports, wildlife, and all of that. So there's less chance to run out of juice with this camera in the normal usage scenario for this camera, which is candid, street photography, even a secondary camera for weddings, but not your main shooter. So yes, they could have improved it. They could have used the other one, but the decision not to makes sense from a design, weight, and size perspective. So yes, it's the old one, but it makes sense. Now, of course, when it comes to video, we're going to talk about video in a moment, that has a little bit more impact, but on the photography side of things, this is not a big deal. And another thing that may seem a big deal, but in reality it's not that much, is the decision to keep the UHS-1 SD card slot. Now, again, it's old tech, and I understand it, but also think about what this camera is designed for. Think about what this camera is supposed to be doing. Think about the use case of this camera. you're not going to be shooting bursts for extended period of time. I think you'd be hard pressed to shoot any 11 frames per second, which is what this camera can do, bursts in your life with a camera like this. I mean, it may happen, but it's not going to happen very often. So again, they could have used a different one, and it would have probably made sense. In this case, probably there was no like counterbalance to go with a UHS-2 other than probably price. So this one on paper is more of an oversight than the battery, but from a practical standpoint, this is not a big deal. Again, when you talk about video, this may have an impact, but for the photography side of things, this is not a big deal. All in all, the X100V was a beautiful and functional camera. The X100VI goes the same direction, doesn't change anything dramatic, and those things that have changed are basically improvements that make this camera better. Yeah, some buttons and dials are slightly different place, probably for a better usage of the camera, but nothing dramatic. The camera remains in its main design the same, and this is a good thing. And so what is new about this camera? Let's talk about that. I already mentioned the IBIS, the in-body stabilization. That is the biggest differentiator between this camera and the other one, and the predecessor. But there's more to it. There's the compatibility to Frame IO, which may or may not affect your personal way of using this camera, but it's there and it's a good thing. But also is the new 40 megapixel sensor together with the new processor. Basically, you get the same performance that you get out of an X-T5 or an X-H2. Now, you don't get the 8K in video, but we're going to talk about that later. But in general, again, from the photography side of things, you get the same kind of performance of cameras that are basically, one of them is the flagship, is the photography flagship for Fuji. So you get all of the greatness of this, and believe me, that sensor together with that processor creates wonders. I love the picture that I get out of those. And also you get the new autofocusing algorithms, the new quicker processor. And although you're not going to be shooting wildlife with this camera, I don't think you're going to ever shoot small birds at 20 meters distance because it's just going to be too small in the frame. But the new algorithms may be useful for dogs, for your pets, for cats, even trains if you want to, maybe cars. Definitely the new eye detection for persons, for humans, is going to do wonders with you, for you with this camera. So you get all of the improvements that you expect from the new generation of sensors and processor. And you also get, as a bonus, you get the Real Ace, which was only available on the GFX 100S2 up until now. And you get also the touch-to-tracking autofocusing. When it comes to video, this is not a video camera. This is not your main video shooter. But you can say that the biggest of the improvements between the X100V and the X100VI or 6 is video. You can finally now shoot very professional video with all the top of the line specs that you get from the other cameras. You get the H.265 10 bits codec. You get the 6K if you want. You get the IBIS that is going to help you stabilizing your footage. You can use microphone, although you need to have a dongle. You can use headphones again with a dongle, and there's only the micro HDMI. But again, this is a small camera. In a pinch, you have all the tools that you need. You just gotta need some dongles with you. And also consider that this is the only camera with Fujifilm, together with the predecessor, that has internal ND filters. Now, if you think about videos, you basically have a camera that you can shoot almost wide open with a 4-stop ND filter while shooting video as a documentary tool together when you're shooting pictures. Now, this is a big, big, big thing. Although, again, this is a more of a photography camera than a video camera, the fact that you can now shoot documentary videos in a great way with this camera while you're shooting pictures in today's world makes a difference. It makes a lot of a difference. And again, this goes into that process of further refinement that Fujifilm has put together, especially with the X100 line, to get this camera more features to make it a complete tool, in this case for documentary. So although this is a photography camera first, you get finally great video specs. Now, of course, you're not going to get the same rolling shutter performance of the XH2S, and the small battery is going to definitely cut your recording time because it's not going to be good enough for shooting long sessions. And again, the UHS-1 card slot definitely cuts your bitrate options, but you're not shooting this as your main camera on a feature film. This is a documentary camera, and the video feature that this camera packs for that type of scenario are more than enough. You can also shoot a vlog too. And again, on a camera like this, it's great. You may not need it, but it's great. For those who need it, it's a huge improvement. So as an X100V owner, should you upgrade? Well, to me, the answer to that question is based on your need for IBIS. Are you someone, or video, are you someone that need IBIS because your type of shooting is that kind of shooting where IBIS makes a lot of a difference? As I mentioned before, the moving train at a station with a still person, or at the opposite, a still background with the person that is running, and you want to leave your tripod home, then yes, definitely go for this one, because you get all the great stuff that you get with the X100V plus the IBIS. On the other hand, if you're someone that uses this camera for documentary and you feel the need to shoot videos, and you've been bringing another camera just to shoot videos, well, guess what? You can get away with using just this one now and save something in your backpack. So these are the two main things that would justify an upgrade from an X100V to the X100VI or VI. If you don't fall in that category, unless you want to have the latest and greatest all the time, I don't see a reason to upgrade, because yes, the new sensor is great. Yes, the megapixel count is increasing. Yes, you get the better autofocus. Yes, you get a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of these improvements may not be needed for a camera like this. On the other hand, of course, if you're one of those that wanted to buy an X100V and couldn't find one, guess what? Get the new one. Get the new one. Get in line for the new one, because the price is not dramatically different, and you get more. You basically get more. So to me, I'll try to get my hands on one as soon as possible, because I definitely want to try it. But this is definitely a great camera that makes a lot of sense, and it goes in the direction that it should have gone to. So it's definitely the camera that it should have been. Now, one thing I forgot, it's made in China. Oh my God, it's made in China. Who gives, you know what? As long as the quality control is good, and I don't doubt Fuji to have any bad quality control, who cares? Who cares? I understand the politics behind it and all that, but we're not talking about politics here. Who cares? The camera is made in China. Maybe Fuji found a way to optimize the way of doing it. Who cares? They need to produce more because they couldn't keep up with the production while they were producing in Japan. Maybe this time they will keep up. So not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. Now, a couple of words on the one more thing. Finally, Fuji is listening and is giving us the Kaizen upgrade that we've been asking by adding the Real Ace, by adding the touch-to-tracking autofocus in video in all of the new generation cameras. It's also improving the autofocus, that's what they said, which we didn't know how much is going to improve, but we'll take the improvement, whatever it is. And it's going to add a few more things like the frame I/O and all of that. So finally, it looks like Fujifilm is dedicating their minds to go Kaizen again. I really think this camera is going to be a big, big, big success for Fujifilm, provided they can produce enough, which, as we've seen with the X100V, it's not always the case. Thank you. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.